Today, we're diving into a conversation that gets real about money, marriage, motherhood, and the pressures that so many women physicians carry as both high earners and primary caregivers. My guest, Dr. Mark Soth, brings a refreshingly honest and empowering take on what it means to take control of your finances and your future without burning out in the process. We talk about everything from breadwinner dynamics and divorce fears to financial planning as a form of self-respect. You're going to walk away from this one feeling empowered and equipped. Hey, I'm Dr. Angela Downey, and this is Paging Dr. Mom, the podcast for women who are juggling careers, kids, chaos, and cold cups of coffee. We're talking about the real life behind the resumes, the messy moments, big feelings, and how to stay human when you're doing all the things. If you've ever felt like the only one trying to keep it together, you're not. We're going to laugh, cry, vent, and thrive together. So here we go. Hello to all my busy mamas. I'm Dr. Angela Downey, and I'm so glad that you're hanging out with me on Paging Dr. Mom. This podcast is for all of us who are just trying to keep it all together while juggling kids, careers, and whatever else life throws our way. We're going to be exploring all those moments that we definitely wouldn't be putting on our resumes. I want to introduce you to today's guest. Dr. Mark Soth is the father of 2 almost adult kids and 2 dogs. He is also a mid-career ICU physician who has shifted gears to help his colleagues learn more about financial wellness and use that on their quest for work-life balance. He does that through the Loonie Doctor blog, the Money Scope podcast, and daily conversations. I've been following Dr. Mark Soth, aka the Loonie Doctor, for a while now, and I knew that I had to have him on the show. He doesn't just talk numbers. He gets to that emotional and practical reality of being a physician under pressure. As a Canadian doc with deep financial expertise and a podcast of his own, he brings a unique perspective that goes way beyond budgeting or investing. He speaks directly to what so many of us face, that guilt around ambition, relationship strain, the stress of being the primary earner, and not knowing where to start when it comes to money. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. It's validating, practical, and full of light bulb moments. Hi, Mark. It's so great to have you on Paging Dr. Mom today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. This is really exciting for me. So you're the first male guest that I've ever had on Paging Dr. Mom. And it's not that I don't want men on the podcast, but it's always worked out that it's mostly just female guests. So I'm really excited to have you here.
Well, I'm really excited to be here too. It's at least half the physician audience are women. So we need to make sure that that you have this voice. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So I reached out to you because you're such a legend in the physician financial world, and I couldn't wait to have you on and to talk to you.
Great. Well, I'm excited.
So maybe we can start by having you introduce yourself and tell us about your journey to becoming the Loonie Doctor while still working as an ICU physician.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Mark Soth, and I keep saying mid-career physician, but I think I'm closer to the second. I'm definitely in the second part at this point. I graduated in 2000, and I initially started off doing some general medicine, respirology, and ICU around 2006 when I finished all my fellowships and whatnot. Partially because I liked the variety, partially because I just needed to piece together different work to make it a full-time practice. And my wife and I had a couple of kids around that time, so having some non-ICU work was quite helpful in terms of the hours. And then a few years into practice, I started to shift gears a bit more from the clinical aspect. We needed to develop our ICU services more within our hospital, so I spent more time doing that and ended up dropping my other clinical work to focus on it. And we eventually ended up becoming more of a coordinated department, and it was interesting. That's kind of where I started some of my financial learning. I'd gotten some, basic financial teaching from my parents. Basically, be careful not to spend too much of your money and put some money in your RRSP each year. But I didn't really pay a lot more attention to it until probably around 2015-ish. And I found that as I was learning more about personal finance and investing, there was all sorts of stuff I wish I had known way earlier. And there wasn't really anybody talking about it at that time, at least not in Canada. There's a few people that were in the US talking about it, but I think we have some different forces at play here. Mm-hmm. So I started writing the Loonie Doctor blog in 2017, and then that's kind of, I've persisted at for all these years, and sort of outlasted there's lots of people in the space that I think have come into it now, which is great. The more voices that we have talking about this, the better. So it's great for me to be here with your podcast and the voice that you're bringing to this and your colleagues. It's great.
So it's interesting that you didn't have much of a financial background before, because now that I'm trying to learn more about finances, it can be really overwhelming and hard to know where to start.
Oh yeah, for sure. I have a much more organized way of thinking about it now, but I ping-ponged all over the place from fire to fire when I started, and I felt like I didn't make a lot of progress right away. And I think, that's one of the first things I would say about this is you hear from the people who have had a relatively straight line or done really, really well. You don't hear as much from the people that are struggling with it and taking longer to move the needle in the direction they wanted to go. And it's very common for it to take at least 5 to 10 years to really get a strong financial base and start to feel like you're making headway.
I'm part of the Physician Financial Independence group on Facebook. I think I've seen you on there as well. And sometimes people will ask questions. I'm like, I don't know what half of this stuff means. So it is sometimes really hard to know where to go with that. And I think a little bit later in the show, we're going to talk about your core curriculum that you have available. And that might be a really good place for people to start. Would you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's on my blog, I started organizing it because it was ping-ponging all over the place. And so I made a core curriculum section of it, which tries to go sequentially through the big basics of personal finance and investing and debt and that type of thing.
I definitely didn't learn a whole lot about finances in medical school. So I'm lucky that I have a little bit of a financial background, but it just, like I said, it can get really overwhelming sometimes. Do you think that there's a difference between how men and women manage their money or approach money?
I think there's so much variability between individuals that I don't know that I could say specifically there's a specific difference. I mean, is some research out there that suggests that men are more aggressive at investing, and that may not actually be a good thing because we may have more overconfidence, which lends us to making decisions and changes. Which actually, when you learn about investing and how markets work, you have to be humble and accept that the markets are very efficient. They're not perfectly efficient, but they're efficient enough that you're not likely to beat them. And the best thing that you could do is to try to go along for the ride without incurring too much costs. So that's, I think, one place where I know men do have more of a problem. On the other side of the equation is women tend to live longer than men, and there are all sorts of factors that play into a wage gap between men and women. It's well documented. We know it exists. And, there's cultural forces that are at play there that make it difficult. We see that in medicine too. I mean, we know it exists in medicine as well. So some of that may be cultural, and that, as physicians, we're kind of told to put patients first no matter what, and that can invade into the rest of our lives. And we have other pressures, and there's cultural pressures on women with that as well, with the other things that go with it. And we also know that there's studies showing that female physicians spend more time on average with patients, and when you're in a fee-for-service system, that means less income as well. So and then there's disruptions with maternity leaves and those type of things. So there's all sorts of reasons why that happened, but that, I think, affects women's relationship with money, because you're always trying to plan to make sure that you've got enough for the long run. And
do you think that people look, I don't know how to word this, maybe look down on women or women feel guilty about wanting more money or being seen as financially ambitious?
Yeah, I mean, that goes with that same cultural narrative that we all have as physicians. We make good incomes as physicians in general, and the average person looks at us and says, well, they've got it made, but we may not feel that way because, we've delayed gratification. We pay more tax. We've got to plan for our own retirement and our own benefits. So we feel like we're trying to catch up on a lot of ways, but people feel that we've made it. So there's that disconnect there, which can make us feel a bit guilty when we talk about money. But I think the question is, how do you try to overcome that? Yeah.
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I have my own thoughts of how to try to do that, but I don't know that I have any right answers for anybody.
Yeah. I struggled with people thinking, oh, you make a lot of money, and then there's like expectation I'm going to buy the dinner because I make more than they do. But what people don't see is all the sacrifices that have been made, right? The big student loan that's still kind of looming over your head. People don't see that side, the 10 years of your life that's kind of been put on hold, and now it's harder to get pregnant because you're waiting longer and needing to go for IVF treatment. So there's a lot of extra stresses. It's not just about, oh, you're making this much money, now you've got it made.
Yeah, no, it all plays in there, and I mean that's actually part of why I started blogging, and I think it's part of why it's so great that you're doing this podcast. Is people outside of medicine often they just you can say it to them, but you don't really understand it until you've lived through it, and it's quite far out of the experience of the average person.
It is.
So some people just don't believe you when you tell them. Yeah.
They think your student loan's just this little thing, but at some point my student loan was worth more than my house. And I don't think people, you can always sell your house. And now I'm having to sell my brain power. I felt like I just had to walk around with a helmet all the time to how do I protect this asset of mine?
Totally.
Until I'm able to pay the student loan off. So I think it's a reality that a lot of people just aren't familiar with.
Yeah.
When I was a med student, I remember asking somebody about how much money do you think a family doctor makes? And immediately it was like, are you only in this for the money? And then there was this element of, shaming that went with that. And I was like, no, but I'm a mom with 2 kids and a big student loan. I need to start preparing for how I'm going to pay this off. Yeah. Do you find that it's hard for physicians to kind of share their financial knowledge with the younger generations?
Yeah,
you probably don't see that, but...
Well, it was hard to do at first. And at first I raised, people I spoke to, if I spoke publicly, it raised eyebrows, and then I'd be approached privately in the hallway to talk about stuff. So, and this is the cultural pressure you're talking about. Exactly. You say no one wants to be seen as they're in medicine for the money, but the reality, money is part of the physical part of our practice that allows us to, like muscles, move our career and our family life in different directions. Yeah. And this is what I think one of the cures for the guilt around us talking about money, and this is usually where I start off when I'm speaking with physician groups about it, is that, money empowers us to be the best doctors we can be and to be the best parents we can be, the best we can be in different parts of our lives. Because what we're doing is we exchange time for money to earn income, but then we also spend money to buy time to do things that are important to us. And if you can spend the time to think about what it is you value and who you want to be within your practice or your home or whatever, you have to be able to prioritize things, set boundaries, and be able to say yes to things and be able to say no to other things, to be able to move your life in that direction. And you can't do that if you're in a bad financial position and you really have to just make money to pay the bills without having that freedom to start choosing the directions that you want to go and making decisions that are in keeping with what you think is most important. So you shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's actually part of how we can achieve the most that we want to achieve.
Yeah. Having a stable source of income for me has allowed me to do so many other things and have some freedom and start this podcast. I have a second podcast called Codependent Doctor, which I started about a year and a half ago. And these are my passion projects. So I like that I am able to continue contributing to society. Like, this doesn't pay me any money, but I love that I have a job that allows me the freedom to do these things that I really like to do.
Yeah, and it's rewarding, and it contributes to, part of the expectation of us as physicians is to mentor our colleagues, help develop medicine as a profession, and help other doctors achieve the most that they can achieve. And yeah, you've been able to get that time protected to do that for yourself. It's a perfect example.
Yeah, no, I love it. So when you're just getting out of school, you're trying to pay off some debt, you're wanting to start investing. Maybe you're trying to buy a house, start a clinic, and then, a lot of women, they're wanting to go on mat leaves and start their families at these points. So how do you help women figure out what to prioritize first? Do you pay off your debt? Do you start investing? Do you build your dream house? What kind of advice do you give for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, just to reiterate what you're saying, it can be overwhelming for people because all of these things that we put off pursuing a career in medicine coalesce at the same time, kind of, for us. And it's extremely common. And again, it takes people longer to get all of that in order than what they think. And you feel a little bit guilty because you see other people around you seem to have it all together, but you may not realize that they're actually papering that over with ongoing debt and they don't have it together, or they may have other, high household incomes or a lot of family support or other reasons why their path is different from yours. But what you can do is stop and take a look at your own situation and say, okay, how can I break this down? How do I know? I have to figure out, first of all, you have to figure out where you are financially and actually understand that, not just have a sense of it, but look at the numbers, take stock of that, make a plan, and then methodically execute. Start with short-term goals that then work towards bigger goals, but you can't do that until you sort of have a sense of where you are and where you want to go to. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I think the first part of that is really to establish some financial stability. And to do that, you have to be aware of how much you're making after taxes and how much you're spending. And that means looking at your bank account rather than just guessing, because we naturally over and underestimate things, or we just plain old forget. And not only does that help you to understand where the money is going from, it also helps you to plan moving forward. There's different things that you need to do from a specific steps to try to get that stability. I mean, on the income side, you need to make sure you have disability insurance to cover you if you have an unexpected disability that comes up. And that's usually a lot of insurance when you start out, because it has to cover your living expenses, saving for retirement, any incremental costs that you may have due to disability, and life insurance similarly is part of that financial stability to make up for your loss of income if you were to die unexpectedly and you have debt and dependents that you have obligations towards. So I think that helps to stabilize your income. Then you have to look at stabilizing your spending too.
Mm-hmm. Is there a clear-cut answer between should you pay off debt first or start investing?
Well, I think I think there is, in the sense that I think before you can invest, you have to have financial stability. And one of the parts of financial stability is paying down your debt. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean paying your debt off completely, but it means paying it down to a level where it's not keeping you up at night. And if you have some cash flow crunches that come up, and they always do, that you can either use your line of credit or you have enough financial wiggle room that you can absorb that cash flow crunch. Because if you're going to invest money, that has to be a long-term endeavor, which means you can't have to sell that investment to pay off something that happens in the short term. So you have to make sure that your debt's down at that level where it's comfortable. Now, that may not be, and the reason why I say it may not be paying it off completely, because you can start investing while you still have some debt and use some of your tax advantage accounts. And that could be a way to actually boost your ability to pay down your debt or invest faster. And the best two examples of that are your FHSA and your RRSP. And that applies whether you're saving for a house, because you could use the FHSA for a house, obviously, but you can also use the home buyer's plan from an RRSP to help pay for a house. But the reason why it's advantageous to consider doing that even while you're in debt is that it's deductible against your income. So if you're in a 54% tax bracket, you get a 54% tax refund. And that's money that
Mhm.
you otherwise wouldn't have had right now that you can put towards debt or investing. If you're collecting Canada Child benefits, then the clawback of Canada Child benefits is based on income. So the RSP or FHSA reduces that as well. So again, that's more cash flow that you can direct towards meeting your debt repayment faster at some points. But you have to be in a position where you can comfortably invest without touching it, which means your debt has to be controlled at least.
Or have a little bit of wiggle room that if something were to happen, you do have access to some credit somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and some people save money, but if you have a line of credit you're paying interest on, the best thing to do is usually to pay the line of credit down.
Yeah. And keeping that in mind, does the age at which you graduate change things? So I graduated when, let's say for myself, I graduated when I was 40. That leaves me a very small window of time that I can invest money for retirement. So if I do have some room on the debt side, should there be should I be investing more at that point than worrying about the debt?
Yeah, so that's it. There's a technical answer to that question, which is yes. When we have a shorter time frame to achieve our goals, which happens to us in medicine, and it can be even more exacerbated if you've had a career before medicine, especially if you haven't been able to save in a lot and invest a lot from that. Then you have a shorter time frame, and that's where debt, which is also called leverage, it can be useful. So you're taking money, you're using that debt like a lever, and that helps to basically accentuate the amount of returns that you get. And whether you take out a loan to invest or whether you're investing while still in debt, logically, it's still the same. It's still leverage because you're choosing to invest instead of paying off the debt. So from a logical standpoint, it's the same type of thing. And if you have a shorter time frame with which to make the money, then leverage can be useful to do that. What debt is basically doing is it's taking income from the future and it's pulling it into the present. That's what debt is functionally doing. So you may have more money later on, but if you can get it working for you now, then you can get the power of compounding even more, because
Right.
compounding growth is very time dependent, and the biggest growth occurs at the end of that time period. Now, so it's a useful tool, but I would say doing that is like every other tool. It's kind of like a power tool.
Hmm.
And, it's easy. It can boost you to have a faster job that's done better, but you could also cut your fingers off if you're not careful with it. So that's the thing about debt, is it magnifies all of your emotions, because instead of seeing your portfolio go up by a little bit, it goes up by more compared to the money that you've got. Or if it goes down, well, you may even owe more money than what your investments are worth, and that is not a good feeling. So
Yeah.
that can magnify the pressure to sell things when they're low or buy things when they're high, which is the opposite of what you want to do for investing. You have to have a long-term plan and be able to ignore all that stuff in the middle. So
Yeah.
yes, it can be very helpful if you have to make up for a late start, but you don't want to take on more leverage than what you can handle safely without getting freaked out by it. Because the
Yeah.
worst thing you can do is actually make a mistake with a power tool.
The leverage didn't seem to be that bad until the interest rates went up higher, and then it got a little bit overwhelming. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you're right. You can totally cut your fingers off. And that tool is no longer helping you. So let's say someone is in a dual income household. How do you suggest that couples divide their financial responsibilities?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I would say that every household is going to be different. The partners are going to be different. The situations are going to be different. So I really can't tell anybody but what the best way for them is. But I do think there are some general principles that, and this is much my opinion as anything else. But one of the things, if we don't openly discuss division of labor with our partner, then there's all sorts of assumptions that are made. And it's anecdotal, but I can tell you that most people that I know of, they're very aware of how they contribute to the household. They may not be fully aware of everything that their partner is doing. And if you don't actually just openly talk about it, I mean, my wife and I, even when we were younger, we made like a list where we had like time that we spent doing different jobs, and we had a grossness multiplier that we applied to that because some jobs were more distasteful for
Disgusting than
other.
others.
Yeah. And yeah, and like our work outside of the home and our work within the home all contributed to that list. So we were trying to make it as even as possible. I mean, you don't have to be as, you know, nerdy about it as we are, but having that kind of open discussion is really important. And even beyond just the financial piece, because if you don't shine a light on that what the division of labor is, and there's all those cultural scripts that are in the background, and they have more power when they're not out in the open, which leads to resentment and problems within the family. So I think open discussion is important, and that's important with financial tasks too. When I think there are studies that are out there that show that couples that collaborate on their finances tend to be happier and less likely to break up. They'll also have a more cohesive plan because they're planning as a household unit. So it's really important that both partners are aware of what's happening for that to take place.
I like that you've brought in the division of labor, because just because one partner makes 70% of the household income and the other partner brings in 30%, you can't necessarily just say, okay, I'm going to pay 70% of the bills and I'm going to pay 30% of the bills if one person's carrying the bulk of the household labor.
Yeah, the thing is when you're a couple and you're married, whether it's common law or otherwise legally recognized marriage, is that you're a unit, and wherever the money comes from, it all goes into that unit, and all the work that needs to be done for that unit. So it's all important, and it's the common denominator for us is time, really, time and effort.
Yeah, I am seeing a lot of women who are the primary breadwinners, but unfortunately, they go home and they're still carrying that emotional load, and doing a lot of the house stuff around the house. So I think it's really important to recognize that, and maybe you need to pay to have somebody come in and help. And nobody needs to be scrubbing toilets when you're busy doing all sorts of stuff at work, and then coming home and you want to spend time with the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's this is part of why it's difficult for different people. Like when you have these discussions with your partner, it's great, because one of the reasons why I think that it leads to better collaboration and happier relationships with each other is because we all kind of come with this baggage around money that's come from our upbringing, or if we've had financial trauma. So some small thing may trigger an outsized response. And if you discuss finances, it inevitably comes out how your relationship with money is, and you can see where you and your partner are aligned and where you're different, and you can actually help each other out with some of that relationship if you have a different perspective on it, and you might be able to balance each other out, or at least understand where the other person is coming from. And the reason why you triggered that thought in my mind is because that's one of the things that my wife and I both struggle with as we grew up in families that didn't have a lot of money, and there was this sort of scarcity mindset that if you would never hire someone to do anything that you could possibly do yourself. So you would never hire someone to clean your house. You would never hire someone to mow your lawn. And if you did those things, you're just throwing money away that you could need later when you run out of money, and you can't waste it that way. So even when it makes sense, like you described, perfect sense to hire for help, that's something we struggled with to hire that help. Even though that it would made by far the most sense for us.
Yeah. I grew up in a household that very middle-class family as well. And my dad was a carpenter, so he did everything. And he taught me everything, right? You need a new toilet? I'm going to teach you how to change this toilet. So I know how to change toilets, light fixtures. So when it came to like decorating and renovating, I would paint my own wall, because the thought of hiring someone to do something that I knew how to do was really challenging for me. Yeah. And it took a long time for me to recognize that it's okay to hire people to help you so that you can focus your time on these other things that you're able to do.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about that, though, is that when you are financially tight or you have the potential of something happening, you've got more reserves, and that's part of your financial reserve is your ability to do things. You got more reserve than the average person does. So I hope you feel good about that, because my daughter and I have a very similar relationship.
Yeah. No, it's
She's
no,
very handy.
my dad and I, we actually built a house together.
That's amazing.
It took us a couple of years, but it was great, and I learned so many like valuable skills. I think if I couldn't have been a doctor, I would have liked to have been a carpenter. Just like that kind of work. It's
it is satisfying.
fantastic.
Do something with
It
your
is
hands
working
like
with
that.
your hands. Yeah. Can we talk about divorce a little bit? Because that's something that's really scary for a lot of people, and the reality is couples are getting divorced. So how can we prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would do is just to acknowledge that divorce it's brutal emotionally and financially. It does set people back. There's no two ways about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it's the only way for people to move forward. And I'm not an expert on the details of how divorce settlements work, but beyond that, from the financial side, the law tends to look at things and at numbers and then splits things up. And there's also an expectation that the lower earning partner will be able to maintain their lifestyle. So those factors definitely work against the high income earner. And it can especially sting if that partner is also the one who carried much of the non-financial weight of running the household on top of that. So you're going to be paying more money to maintain your ex-partner's lifestyle. And well, you also bore the brunt of running the household a lot more too. So that can be just emotionally very difficult for people. And then from the financial part of it, I don't know much about how to prepare for a very impending divorce, other than to make sure that you get yourself legal help and the best help that you can, because you have to look out for yourself. Mediation may be a less expensive and worth a first pass, but it may also be difficult due to the negative emotions involved.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the areas where having a prenuptial agreement or even a post-nuptial agreement may be helpful, because you're discussing some of these financial issues that are going to come up in a divorce at a time when things are good and those negative emotions aren't driving the discussion as much. It also documents what people have financially at the start, so that's not something that gets fought over at the breakup. I mean, in terms of what are the rules what those agreements might protect or not protect, it actually varies by province. So you'd really want to have a legal expert for that. I have seen
province
a few,
and by country.
Yes.
Yeah.
For people that are for multiple countries, it's true. I mean, there are some things from a financial standpoint, the little tidbits that I picked up just from people that I've helped who are in this kind of situation. I mean, one of the little nuances there that people can get caught up is that when you do pay spousal support, it gets deducted from your income. That means you don't pay tax on that, which is good. But it also potentially reduces your RSP contribution room, because it reduces your income off of which that is calculated. So you may add to theirs instead. But if you're not aware of that, I've seen people get caught off guard because they contribute to their RSP like they normally would, but suddenly the amount of contribution room has been reduced because of spousal support payments.
And child support payments not you don't get any tax deduction on that, not here in Manitoba or Canada. Mark, where are you from?
I'm in Ontario.
You're in Ontario. Okay. Yeah. So we, here in Canada, I believe we don't get to write off the child support payments. So that's after tax money, which, when you're in a pretty high tax bracket, having to pull that money out of after tax money to pay it, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's precious.
Yeah, at one point I was calculating how much I needed to bill in order to pay my child support payments, and I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm not going to look at this again because I think I'm just going to cry.
Yeah, I was going to say no.
It was a lot.
Yeah, that's just adds salt to the wound.
It does. It hurts. But eventually the kids do grow up, and that kind of goes away. There's this cultural script that says that the good mom doesn't care about money and the good doctor puts patients first no matter what the cost is. So how do those beliefs hold women back? And how can we let go of those beliefs?
Yeah, well, I mean, so those, and again, those are culturally driven forces that
Mhm.
are there. We talked a little bit about that at the beginning, the culture of not talking about money and that you're a helping person as a physician, and to talk about money means you're in it for the wrong reasons. And then as a parent, that adds another layer of pressure there because you want to be there for your kids and you need to be there for your kids. And the thing about medicine is it can be such a consuming career that it can invade over into the other side. Being a parent takes a lot of time, and either one of those things on their own could take all of your time. And you get pulled between those two things, and you feel guilty because you're not meeting the expectations of one or the other, quite often both of those realms. So I think that's where the guilt comes from. At least that's where it came from for me, anyways. That I know I'm not a mom, but uh, I've really wanted to be a present parent in my kid's life. So I think that that's probably where it comes from. And in terms of how to address it, I think there are things that we can do. I mean, cultures are slow to change and they're very resistant to change. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
personalities and treating someone with a personality disorder. It's very difficult, but there's things that I think we can do individually within our own lives. I think it starts with taking the time to understand what it is that you value and you think is most important. And, that sounds very vague, but you can start to tease that out by asking yourself, who do I want to be? And the answer to that will be different in your job. It'll be different at home. It'll be different with your family or friends. But who do you want to be in those different settings? And then even writing that down and prioritizing them because you can't be everything to everybody and meet everything at all times. So you have to have some priorities that are in there to help you when you encounter conflicts between those values. And then setting some boundaries between those different parts of your life, between work and home, between those things and looking after your own health. If those are all different areas that you have values in, setting some boundaries that are there that you can use to help you make decisions. And one of the things that's helpful in that is to remember that if you say yes to something, it means you're saying no to something else because you only have a
Yeah.
certain amount of time and energy. So if you have those values and prioritizations, you can do that. And it helps you to say no to some things because you're saying yes to other things and you've thought of a way of trying to balance that out. Now, of course, it's great to talk about all these things, but when the rubber hits the road, you'd be overwhelmed if you were thinking about this at all times. So you need to pick some big things that are important to you. Things that are not so important, you can make what are called decision rules for. Like if this situation comes up, I know that I would just do this because that's what I've thought about ahead with my values, and I'm not going to take offloads that decision making from me. So to me, those are some ways that I think that we can try to combat that. I mean, we're not going to be able to be everything to everyone, but how is it that
Yeah.
we can think about what's important to us and try to prioritize and move our life, make our decisions around? And again, having more financial independence helps to give you a bit more freedom to do that because it's hard to say no to earning income to say yes to something that's important to you if you have to earn that income to keep afloat.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you've talked about values a couple of times and everybody comes with their own values, the way that they grew up with things that they were taught, these taught from their parents. So I know for myself, I see money as a tool to get the things that I want, to go in the direction in life that I would like to go on. And I use money in that way. My partner sees money as something that can be stored away and kind of invested and squirreled. And so every dollar that comes in, they're looking for a way to put that into savings. So it's kind of creating this disconnect where our spending habits are a little bit different. So how can you take the things that we've grown up with, and we've both grown up very differently in different types of households with different beliefs about money. So how can we find this happy medium where we can both get what we need?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on it again, but there is a book called Spendthrifts and Tightwads, or Tightwads
Mm,
and Spendthrifts, which
yeah.
talked about, some of the relationships we've grown up with money and how some people approach it differently. Uh, and how can they have relationships with each other and still make it work because they have this different approach with money. So that's a good book to read. In terms of what can you do, I think that there's a few things. One is that you're not going to make massive changes to the way people have their relationship with money in a short period of time. But again, I think this comes back down to discussing your spending choices and what you're going to do with your money together, and then, understanding where each other is coming from.
Yeah.
And then, thinking about the other person's perspective of it. And then sometimes it may change your perspective. Sometimes it may change their perspective, and you move into a different decision. And, like one of the things that helped my wife and I, because we have our own mix of spendthrift and tightwad, is that, you can't take it all with you when you're dead. So, if you're squirreling it all away for the future, yes, you want to make sure that you don't run out of money. But this is part of the value of a financial plan, is if you can make a financial plan and track your progress and know where you are, know where you're going, and you see yourself ahead of the curve, that you're not going to run out of money and you're going to be okay, then a question to ask yourself is, what if I had the money to do something in the future, what would I do? And then flip the question and say, well, why am I not doing it now? Should I be doing that now because there's not a reason not to? And kind of understanding where you are financially helps to change that script a little bit for people. At least it did for us and our tightwad tendencies. But again, it comes down to actually thinking about it, discussing it with each other, and spending some time reflecting on it.
How can we teach our
baby
kids?
Steps.
Yes, very small steps at a time. And you eventually, I think I like how you said just gaining a better understanding of why our partner feels that way, I think is really important. And then trying to find some middle ground that you can start working with.
Yeah. And I'm not joking when I say baby steps. It really is. It just made me think of, one of the first things that happened with us when we started out. If there was something on sale for food, we would buy a ton of it, stockpile it. I had this big backpack that I'd fill with Puritan stew when it was 88 cents a can. And one of the baby steps that we took early on when we had even just a bit more financial stability is to not worry about the price of the food we were buying.
Yeah.
And that was actually a struggle at the beginning, but it was so liberating when we actually made that change. And then small changes like that add up over time.
I love cherries. And when cherries first come out in the spring, they're just ridiculously expensive. But that's one gift I give to myself is just, I don't care how much the cherries cost. Right. Once winter's over, I'll buy those cherries and enjoy every minute of eating them. But
that's perfect.
Sometimes you need to do those things for yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I will pay whatever the cost is required for raspberries on my cereal in the morning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fair enough. How can we teach our kids about money?
Yeah. So again, there's a good book that's out there. It's I've written it down here. There's actually a bookshelf section on the Loonie Doctor blog where I've got a bunch of different books that are there. But there's a good book by Robin Taub, and it's called The Wisest Investment: Teaching Your Kids to Be Responsible, Independent, and Money Smart for Life. Robin Taub's the author. So if you want a good book to read, I'd read that. But the other thing I would say is that every kid is different, and what works for one kid is not going to work for the other kid, and every family is a bit different. And then you also have to be, of course, age appropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think one of the biggest things that you do is modeling, because it's a constant thing that you do, and your kids pick up all of those signals about how you relate with money and how you manage money. So recognizing what patterns that you were raised with is a good start. We've talked a bit about that today already. What's good about them, like being able to fix stuff is a great skill to have. If you need to be able to use it, what are some of the potential pitfalls of things that you've developed, brought to the table, and it requires some reflection and effort. But for us as a family, we openly discuss money is a normal part of family life. I mean, the discussions that we have change as the kids have gotten older, but it's something that we've discussed. If we're going to have a major purchase, we talk about it and why we think it's important, and we mull it over and how we're going to pay for it, and we plan for it. So they get to see that whole process. So I can see them doing that process now as they're getting older. They're into their late teens at this point. But that, I think, that also models this communication aspect, which I've talked about, which I think is so important because they see us doing that and making those decisions and working through it. I mean, the other thing you do is you can try to take advantage. There's teachable moments that when they come up, and you also can help them try to develop good habits in an age-appropriate way. That may be early on. It may be having an allowance, and how do you plan for setting some aside, spending some, and giving some of that money as they get older? Maybe how to make a budget, or with our kids now, we're now at the point where we're teaching them some of the basics of investing. We are there with them doing it, but they're getting to the habit that when you make some money, you set some of that money aside, you invest it, and this is a way to do it that's cost effective and likely to be successful in the long run. And they get to see that fluctuate up and down as well. So it's going to depend on the kid. It's going to depend on your family. But the thing is to spend some time thinking about it and try to model those behaviors and take advantage of the opportunities that come up to teach about it.
You're right about the modeling. And, thinking back, I had my 2 kids as I was going through medical school. We did not have a lot of money. Money was this great source of stress, and not knowing when money was going to come in, and always looking at what's on sale, and we can't afford that right now. Money doesn't grow on trees. These were the messages that we were, that I was giving my kids. And now that I'm more financially stable, I'm a physician now, I'm working, my child is still stuck in this money equals anxiety state. And it's interesting how much is internalized, these messages that we give to kids as they're growing up. And I'm not sure how to overcome that, but that's something that. Well, I think I'm sure he'll be in therapy for that.
Yeah, well, you can. It's never too late to change, and to put. And as kids become more adult, they realize that you weren't perfect, and you can talk about some of the things that you might have thought about doing differently, and how you've seen that it's affecting them, and have that discussion with them. I think I don't know where I read this, but it was something that changed how I had that discussion with my kids, because I had the same thing. The classic line was, I know you're going to ask me about a quote later, but one of the quotes I got as a kid all the time was, "It's not in the budget." So, but the script is a bit different when you actually do have enough money. It's not that, well, we're not going to buy that because we can't afford it. You have to change it to, well, we're not going to buy that or spend our money on that because, and then you talk about what you think is more important to spend the money on, and what you think spending it on that is going to do, and whether that's going to be aligned with what you think is important, and whether it's going to make you as happy as you think it's going to make you happy, and whether that's going to last, all those kinds of things. So changing it from we can't afford it to we're not going to spend our money on that because, and then having the discussion behind your spending decision.
Yeah. That's a much better conversation to have. We're not going to buy this because we don't need it or we don't want it, as opposed to we can't afford it, right? Having that financial security changes a lot in the conversations that you're having. What are some of the common financial blind spots that you see in physician households?
Well, I mean, I think we've touched on a few of them already. Not knowing where the money goes at all is a blind spot. And, we're able to paper over not knowing where the money goes if we have a high income and it's covering what we are paying for currently. And it doesn't really come to the forefront until something happens. Either you can't work as much because there's something happens with you or a family member or health issue or burnout or whatever. And then suddenly it comes out that you're spending everything that you've been making and you can't make that anymore. Or the other way it comes out is if there's some unexpected expense that then you can't ratchet it up to pay the extra for that expense because you've been spending the money and you just don't know where it goes. So that's one blind spot, is to be aware of where the money is coming and going from, and be sure you're not just papering that over because you have a high income.
Yeah.
As we mentioned before, not fully understanding what both partners are doing in terms of not just the work around the household, but also financially as well. If you aren't discussing it with each other, then your investments may not be working together. You may not be using the optimal account mix. You may not be planning for the income splitting later on to minimize your taxes. You may be double invested in one area, so you have more risk than what you realized. Or you may not be, when you add your money and their money, all the investments together, you may not have the risk profile that you think, because you need to be taking enough risk to achieve your goals, and you need to have it be safe enough that you can stick to that plan. And if you don't know what's going on throughout your entire financial life, then you don't know that until something comes up, of course, and then it all comes out into the open, and you have to try to do damage control. So I think those are some of the blind spots that I've seen.
Yeah. For any woman out there who's struggling financially right now, what's one message that you want her to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a bunch of factors beyond your control. And there may even be some past decisions that have contributed to your struggles, but you can't change those things very easily. However, there are things that you can do. Figure out where you stand financially and start making a plan like we talked about a bit earlier. And, don't beat yourself up. It is normal for it to take years to get into good financial shape. Don't be embarrassed about it. It's very common, and you don't hear people talk about it. You hear the people that are in good shape are the most vocal about it. But I can tell you that it's very common just from the different people that I interact with it. And I would say that educating yourself is going to be important, whether you seek professional advisor help or not, because you need to either understand what's important to either do some of it you're going to have to do yourself no matter what. And if you do hire an advisor, to recognize where they're going to give you value for the money that you're paying them and whether they're giving you good advice or not. So you need to learn a bit more about finances and investing. And, you can start with learning some basics through books or blogs or podcasts like this one.
Yeah, amazing. Mark, I love quotes. Is there a particular quote that you love and would like to share with us?
Sure. Well, I've already given one, which is
who do you want?
Yeah. Who do I want to be is one of the quotes. Because that's a good way to stop and ask yourself when you're facing some dilemma. Yeah. And which route of it that I take, how is that going to align with who do I want to be? So I think for me, quotes have to be quick, snappy one-liners for me to remember them. And they have to be useful, which means I have to be able to remember them when I'm facing some stressful decision. Yes. So that's one of them. The other quote, which I think is useful on the investing side, is to just say to yourself, it is all priced in. And we're constantly bombarded by stories in the media, by experts telling us where money's markets are going or where investments are going, what the next hot trend is going to be and how to make money and the next big investment. But the reality is that markets are very efficient and they price in all the known information that's out there. So if you're hearing it, it is known. And the market's priced that in, that story you've heard and the probability of it happening is priced in there. And unless you know something that nobody else in the world knows or better than all of the big experts, you're not going to be able to more efficiently invest in that. So knowing that it's all priced in allows you to be free and not spend your time thinking and worrying about investments. Just try to go and get the market returns the best that you can in a diversified way, keeping your costs down and not wasting your time trying to beat that.
So, Mark, if I wanted to invest my money in something that would help, the cost would be kept down and I want to keep it really simple, what would you suggest I invest in?
Yeah, so I, of course, have to preface that with the standard disclaimer that I don't give specific investment advice. I don't. I'm just helping colleagues out. But there's a few big principles to keep in mind, and there's a whole body of evidence to back them up. And it's important for you to be aware of that because it goes against the grain of what we naturally do as physicians. We are used to being smarter and working harder, getting better results. But as you alluded to, a simple approach is actually, the evidence supports that as the best approach with investing. So there are products out there like, for example, all-in-one ETFs. So an ETF is a fund that you can buy using a discount brokerage. So you log on like online banking, you buy the ETF that suits your risk tolerance. So you do like a risk tolerance questionnaire and think about how much risk and reward can I have to handle, and you'd buy the flavor that suits your risk tolerance. And it seems so simple and can be low cost, but what that does is buying that fund invests you in thousands of companies around the world. So you're instantly diversified amongst different companies around the world. And diversification is one of the only ways that we can reduce risk without reducing our returns. So it's got a good base behind that. And as I mentioned, markets are very efficient. And the best you can hope to do, and there's data to support this, is try to match that market while minimizing costs. And these types of funds have low costs, like less than 0.25% a year in terms of cost. And it does all the work for you. Just when you have money, you buy more of the same thing. It takes about 5 minutes at a pop. And the hardest part is just when you have money to invest it, ignore what's going on in the news, invest it, and keep it invested, ignoring what's going on around you until you need the money. Yeah, that's actually the hard part. But from a what can you invest in standpoint, that type of investment is very simple to use and very cost effective and has a good body of evidence behind it.
Yeah. Sometimes it might be exciting to go buy all these stocks, these individual stocks, but really just putting your money in a simple ETF and parking it. Although it might sound boring, that's probably one of the safest things we can count on to bring us some returns.
I just kind of threw out a whole bunch of information there. I should say that on the Loonie Doctor blog, there's a DIY Investor Hub section of it, which has education behind all those things that I just said, and even goes through kind of a step-by-step process with screenshots about the kind of things that you do to pull the levers, because we're used to making life and death decisions, yet we all get nervous when it comes to pulling levers with our money.
Sure. Can you tell me about the core curriculum on Loonie Doctor?
Yeah, so the site it can go as deep and complicated as it could go, but one of the things that I've done is I've put together a core curriculum section which takes what I think are some of the most important things to think about and puts them into an order and organizes it through a bunch of blog posts and articles that kind of build on each other. So there's that core curriculum section, which then goes through a bit of a curriculum. There's also the Money Scope podcast, which Ben Felix and I have done, which also is basically a curriculum. It starts off pretty reasonable, but towards the later episodes, it can get pretty complicated because it's written both by me for physicians and Ben for physicians, but also financial professionals as well. So those are a couple of curriculum options that are out there.
Perfect. How can listeners find you?
Yeah, so on my blog, there's a contact button there, which people can use that to send me an email. If I haven't answered you, it's because the address got typed in wrong or something like that. I answer all the emails that get sent to me. And again, I don't charge or give specific financial advice, but I here as a colleague to bounce stuff off of and just to hear what's going on if you have questions. That's part of why I made the curriculum, because it helps to answer a lot of the common questions. But I can tell you, even with that, people will always have things that they didn't quite understand or they just want to ask you about. And I do my best to answer all of those.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much for being here today. You were very generous with your information, and I love that you're such an insightful guest, and it was a real gift to have you here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to all of you who are hanging out with us on Paging Dr. Mom. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up next. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you can find me over on Instagram at drangeladowney. I would love to hear from you. So take care for now. You are doing better than you think. That is it for today's episode of Paging Dr. Mom. If it made you smile, nod along, or feel just a little more seen, then go ahead and hit that follow button and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Take care for now. You are doing better than you think.